Whiskey or the devil, you lead me astray. All the hills and mountains into a manic cave. There's sweeter, stronger days until you're spunky Ireland day. Oh, whiskey are a darling, drunk or sober.
Now when boys are off, marching off to Portugal and Spain. Drums are beating, banners flying, know the whole will come tonight.
Love very well. Whiskey to the end, doodle-la-ma-da. Meet to the end, doodle-la-ma-da. Be wet for laddie ho, there's whiskey in the jar. Hey, whiskey on the devil.
Hello, and welcome to Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. I am your co-host, Sam, here with my co-host, Sean. Sean, how you doing?
Doing great and excited to talk about today's topic.
Yeah, let's get into it. Real quick, if you are listening to this show, please subscribe, like us, leave us a review, share it with your friends and family. We are Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. We talk about the Lord of the Rings. We talk about Vox Machina and Critical Role. And today we are talking about a special area of interest. Sean, you want to kind of intro our topic for today?
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about Renaissance fairs or Renaissance festivals. It is, I consider it to be kind of a nerdy thing that is
Absolutely
becoming more and more relevant in terms of like the cultural zeitgeist. Yeah, I don't know. I'm excited to talk about it. I've been kind of nagging you to do this one, and you've finally acquiesced to my desires.
Well, you also did the legwork in getting our guests, which we will intro when appropriate. But this is a fun topic, and one that we kind of shared together. At least your first experience with Ren fairs was kind of an outgrowth of, I think, probably our family D&D games is what really fed into it.
Yeah. So for the most part, this episode is going to be mostly just a dialogue conversation between us, and we're not reviewing really anything. I guess we could review the Michigan Renaissance Festival.
Oh, I've got some complaints.
Just because that's the one we've both been to. But now that I'm out in Washington, my local Ren fair is the Washington Midsummer Renaissance Fair. It'll be a lot of conversation dialogue. Today, eventually this might turn into a multi-episode series on Renaissance fairs, but for at least the next 2 weeks, we're doing entertainment primarily, and we'll talk about other aspects of Renaissance fairs as well. But I don't know. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. Initially, you're right. My first experience with the Renaissance fair was, it's either 4 or 5 years ago now in Michigan before Carly and I moved out to Washington. And I think for the most part, if you're familiar with the Michigan Renaissance Festival, it's on the east side of the state. So like growing up on the west side of the Lower Peninsula, that's a pretty good drive to get all the way over there. And I don't think the news of it made it over to me as like a high schooler or college student that this was a festival that went on. And I didn't know anybody from my side of the state that went. So you and Haley telling me about it was the first time. And I think you're right. I think it came out of, we were trying to schedule a D&D session for the family. And it just happened to be during one of the weekends. And I think you and Haley suggested that we all come out, play D&D, and then wake up early the next morning and go to the Ren Fair. Or Ren Festival, Michigan Renaissance Festival.
Yeah, we don't want to get a copyright infringement or something like that.
I don't want to say it wrong. But yeah, so I can attribute my now love affair with Renaissance fairs to you and Haley having us go out about 4 or 5 years ago. Where does yours start with Renaissance fairs?
So I have a memory, and I should probably I could have talked to my parents about where this came from. I have a memory as a very small child, maybe five or six, of going to a Renaissance festival. Probably it would have been somewhere in Northern Virginia when we lived in DC and Virginia before I was a middle school student. And I remember a turkey leg, which is a very common thing among Renaissance fairs. And I remember a pirate ship. And other than that, nothing. It wasn't until I was in, I want to say it was the summer between middle school and high school, when I went to the Silverleaf Renaissance Festival, which was the or excuse me, this was the Silverleaf Renaissance Fair, which was another Michigan-based Renaissance fair on the west side. I went, it's actually kind of a convoluted story. So the summer before my freshman year in high school, I worked for a family friend who was a framer. I worked in construction. So I was a gopher on a construction site. And here's what it was the year after that. One of my coworkers.
You're right.
Was,
this is getting convoluted.
Oh yeah, we're going in. Hey, just trying to fill some content, right? So one of my coworkers worked at the Renaissance Fair, the Silverleaf Renaissance Fair, as an actor, and he was in a group called the Blue Dragons. So if there's any Blue Dragons out there, give us a holler. And so I think he was talking about it, and I decided to go, and I had money because I was working, and I had spent way too much money, which is something that many fair attendees can probably have a shared experience here. Way too much money on a cape and a dagger, and I think I had that dagger for years, and I think eventually my parents took it. Maybe they sold it in a yard sale or something. And this was right around the time when I was getting into the Lord of the Rings. The movies were coming out when I was a young kid. People were talking about the Lord of the Rings movies at the fair, and that it was shortly after that I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. That was like my real entry into kind of nerdy stuff, nerdy fantasy stuff.
And we established this is like Lord of the Rings came out winter of 01. So this is like summer, spring 02. So you're looking at like 20 years ago.
Yes.
You had your fair experience.
Yes. And that particular fair shut down about 10 years ago. And then I can't remember what it was. Maybe I just saw a Facebook ad or something for the Michigan Renaissance Festival and thought it'd be fun. And I can't remember if maybe Haley and I went to it together, and then we said, hey, you guys should come and we'll all go. But now it's kind of our annual thing. We'll go at least once a year. We have costumes, slowly accumulated our various accoutrements.
Yeah, I remember seeing when we went all together that first year, none of us had costumes. And it's so jarring now because I have like a full head to toe. I even bought shoes at the Washington Midsummer this year.
Nice.
So I have like literally from head to toes an outfit that I wear. And my character that I go as is a bard. So eventually I need to find like a lute that I can string across my back that doesn't have strings because I don't know how to play the lute and I don't want people to put me on the spot.
I feel like
that cool.
The go-to is the bard, right? Everybody wants to be the bard. You get to dress
Yep.
flamboyantly. You get to be outgoing. I'd like to see the like the plague victim, the person who's like slowly dragging themselves across the fair.
Well, there's a lot of plague doctors that I see at fairs. That's the bird beak mask is, yeah. I mean, looking back at those pictures, it's pretty funny because now I would never go to a fair dressed in like a crew neck sweatshirt and jeans like I did that time. I don't know. I absolutely love Renaissance fairs. And when we moved out to Washington, before we moved, I researched if there were any like local fairs or drivable fairs. And I have two within driving distance. So the Washington Midsummer Ren is about 30 minutes away from me in Tacoma. And then there's the Oregon Renaissance Festival that is new. And I think this last summer was their first summer, but that's probably like a 2-3 hour drive to get to the Oregon one. But that's around my birthday. So next summer, Carly and I are going to drive out for that for my birthday and then come up to the Washington as well. But this last summer, I was at the Washington Ren Fair every weekend. Washington Midsummer Renaissance Fair is great that it's so local. It's like I said, 30 minutes from Tacoma, but you have all of Metro Seattle that comes down to it as well. So it gets really, really busy. Having it be so drivable is great. You have 3 weekends of just amazing time. There's great music that we're alluding to because our episode today is part 1 entertainment. So we have a band coming on later that we were able to interview. They are the Scuppermonkeys. So we're excited to show that to all of you listening at the end of this episode. But I mean, Ren fairs in general, I just love how accepting it seems to be. You see high school age kids walking around in their getup that they've created at home. So it's a place where people can go and not feel awkward. And I feel like this is one of those spaces that if you're an individual in a school setting, you have the opportunity to go somewhere and not feel like an outsider, like an outcast. So I think that's one thing that Renaissance fairs in particular are able to do for individuals. And I hit a point where, like I was saying earlier, I feel uncomfortable going now not dressed.
Yeah, you feel like
in
a
my
tourist,
Yeah.
like
I don't feel a part of it.
like a time traveling tourist. And there's a way to lean into that, right? You see pictures of people who are walking around, and then every once in a while they'll stop and they'll like show that they have a Starfleet badge, and their character is actually a Starfleet or a Federation explorer who's traveled back in time, which is funny. But yeah, the walking around in your street clothes, you do feel uncomfortable. That's one of the reasons why I got a costume. You do feel more able to kind of shed that, your 9-to-5 persona. And like, I have a harder time kind of being goofy in public. Like, I can be pretty goofy when I'm with people I know, but the Renaissance festivals, a lot of especially if you go to the shows, some of the audience interaction is very goofy. I remember once here in Detroit, I went to Eastern Market because they had a Renaissance fair pop-up and you could buy tickets at a discount price. And they also had a variety of vendors there with clothes and mugs and various drinking horns and things like that. So I went, and that was before I had a costume, and I bought a costume, and then coming out, they had some of the performers gathering around, and they got a couple of volunteers. And I think I don't remember if I volunteered or if I was kind of pressed into this encounter, but I kind of like felt myself coming out of my shell because I had to all of a sudden compete for a t-shirt, and the competition was a wench pressing, their term, not mine. And you basically had to lift one of the volunteers off the ground and then make a profession of love. And whoever's profession was deemed the most moving would be given the free t-shirt. Now, I was robbed. I should have won, but I did not. I didn't get my t-shirt. But it's little things like that where at first you may bristle, but then it's like, just go with it. And there's kind of an improv thing to it, which is just so much fun. And you get to be surrounded by that. And yeah, it's very inclusive.
Yeah, you feel like when you go in costume, you feel like you're a part of it.
Yeah.
Which is a great feeling. There's just so much joy and fun going around and going on around you that, I don't know, it's a great experience. And it makes me go back time and time again. And I love the Michigan Renaissance Festival so much that I was so bummed out this year that I couldn't swing the tickets to fly back just for a weekend to go, because the Michigan Renaissance Fest in Holly, it's in the woods. You feel like you're in nature, but then you mix it with all of the like actual structures for the shops that they have, like these permanent structures that you get to walk in and out of.
They're doing a holiday market right now.
Oh, are they really?
Yeah, this is the first year I've seen it, but the whole place is decorated with lights and Christmas time displays and holiday stuff. And I think it was last weekend, but they actually brought in vendors so people could go and do a shopping thing. Now that's a pretty long trip for me to go shopping, but it's great that they're really leaning into the year-round thing. But yeah, I haven't been to the Washington fair that you've gone to, but having permanent structures, having a site, I think it's been there I think the festival started in 1979. I don't know how long they've been at Holly Grove, but long enough where there are tall trees and permanent structures. You can easily get out of the shade. It's a little low lying, so if it's been raining a lot, were you there that year when it was super muddy?
Yes, I was.
Yeah, and that was an experience, but one where if you're, some of the performers were really leaning into it. I think they even have a mud stage where mud is part of the show.
Act.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have joined a group recently on Facebook, Renaissance Festivals, Fairs, and Cosplay Fans. When I look at so people post, I'm going to this fair in Texas, or I'm going to this one in Virginia. Other fairs run so long in a season that it makes me so jealous. Because the Washington Fair only goes 3 weekends. And if it went 2 months, every weekend for 2 months, I would probably go 4 or 5 weekends to just go and enjoy myself. I can't remember the Michigan Fair is like 2 months, 2 months of weekends. Is that correct? Somewhere along those lines.
I think it ends up being 9 weekends.
9 weekends.
Yeah, I think that's the case.
See, that could be like a sweet spot for me. Like 9 weekends. That's a lot of time. I just feel like in Washington, like the 3 weekends, and I know there's so many because they rent the space, they don't own it. So it's different if you have a plot of land that's yours and then you can run it however long you want. You can build permanent structures, do whatever you want to do. 3 weekends just isn't enough for me. I need to find ways to supplement that. And it might be flying to Michigan for a weekend might be how I do that, or having maybe next summer after I go to Oregon and only have to wait like a month or 2 in between Washington starting up. That might be enough for me to feel satiated, but I don't know if I will.
You could investigate your local chapter of the Society for Creative Anachronism. The folks who are working, or some of the crafts people, the folks that are really mainstays of the Renaissance Fair, many of them, I think, are members of the Society for Creative Anachronism, who are all about kind of recreating the Middle Ages as they should have been. And I think that's part of the spirit that you get this, inclusive nature of, gender equality and racial diversity and things like that, tolerance. But they're also maintaining a lot of those crafts and skills, and I think a lot of it is around the fighting, the authentic fighting. It's whether it's jousting or archery or sword fighting, spear throwing, things like that. There's probably a group around you that's doing stuff year round. It just might be in a park under a gazebo or at somebody's house. Not a big thing. But
changing gears towards what our subtopic for Renaissance fairs is today, that entertainment piece. One thing that allows me to keep going back to a Ren fair every weekend is the incredible diversity of music that they have and other forms of entertainment as well. But I tell people, I went with some friends one of these last weekends, and if you treat your ticket into the Renaissance Fair as your cover to see a show, you are getting so much free entertainment. Basically, you can go drink at the bars. A lot of the bars have stages. You can sit there and have a mead. One of the last weekends, I got really drunk off of mead and just sat at one bar and just listened to music for hours and hours. And if you get tired of music, you can hop over to another bar and watch jousting and we have a really cool one in Washington. I'm sure they go to other places as well, but it's called Equestrian Chaos. And it's these 4 women who, I think it's got like a Mongolian horseback vibe. They do like bow and arrow, cool tricks on horses. That one's really fun to watch. Yeah, it's just so diverse, and there's so many different things you can do for entertainment. You get so much for your ticket in. There's so much that's free to do once you get into the fair. You don't have to spend money on extra stuff. It doesn't hurt to spend money on extra stuff. That's where you get your cool horns, your drinking horns, and your outfits, and you get to support local craftspeople who are just traveling fair to fair, selling their crafts. What's your favorite entertainment thing to do when you go to the Ren Fair? Let's say Michigan Renaissance Festival is happening. What are your top 4 things you got to do before you can go?
Number 1 is the jousting. Michigan Renaissance Festival has full contact jousting with knights, fully armored horses that are running at a pretty good gallop, or if not a gallop, then at least a fast trot. I don't know all of my equestrian terminology. There's also some skill demonstrations with tilting at rings and some other kind of martial art demonstrations on horseback. That's definitely one. There's always a theme to the weekend, and we usually go on the Scottish Highlands or Irish themed weekend. So there's kind of a Highland Games. I think it's called Highland Fling. I'll usually try to go on that weekend. to see the Scottish strongmen competitions of, the caber toss and the hammer toss and keg carrying and things like that. This past summer, we did an escape room, which was a decent amount of fun. I like especially the traditional music. So somebody playing a mandolin or some of the drum and pipe bands. Not that I won't listen to kind of more modern interpretations, but just I like the traditional stuff because it's so you don't really don't hear that anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final thing would be the actual games of when you can shoot the bow and arrow and throw the spear and throw the knife and the axe and all that stuff. That's usually a lot of fun. I don't know if they have this. Silverleaf Renaissance Festival had a throw a tomato at a guy in a
jester outfit.
Yeah, and he got pretty good at
antagonizing
making fun of people. Yeah, and he got me pretty good, but I remember hitting him with a tomato right in the face. Yeah, there's a lot to do. I will say one of the things that is a qualm that I have is the time. It's the distance away from my house and the travel involved, because I would like to spend more time there, and I would also like to spend more time there trying the meads and the ales and things like that. And that's a just harder thing to do when you have a long drive on the front and the back end. And so it's a little challenging. And this is something we talk about in the interview, but if there were a camping option at Renaissance festivals, I think that would be a cool way to spend more time there, do it in a way that you can be safe and you don't have to worry about driving home under the influence, even if it did get a little muddy. What about you? What are your top Renaissance Fair entertainment?
For me, when I go, I need to see if I'm going to the Washington Run Fair for one weekend and I can't go any other weekends, I would have to see jousting. I have to sit down in a bar, have a drink, and listen to some music. I don't know if I'm as stingy on the more traditional instruments as you are, but two of my favorite shows out here. Luckily, we get to talk to the Scuppermonkeys in an interview later on. They are probably one of my top 3 performers at the Washington Fair. And then I don't remember the name of the group, but it's like 4 guys who play drums in like an Irish drum show. It's pretty entertaining, and they're very good at audience engagement as well. So they make it really fun when you go watch them. And then the other things for me really are food. Like I need at least 1 turkey leg and Scotch eggs. If I don't have a turkey leg or Scotch legs, I'm out. And part of the problem here is that it got so busy that they were running out of turkey legs, and it'd be like a Saturday afternoon, evening, and the fair's open Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. And if they run out of turkey legs on like Saturday, they're like, oh yeah, sorry, we're out until next weekend.
Yeah.
So there were days when Carly and I would go, we'd go in the gate at 10 a.m. when they opened, and I would go straight to the turkey leg line and then straight to the Scotch egg line, because I had to make sure that I got both of them. And yeah, demand is getting so high at this fair, and we talk about it in the interview as well, that they stopped selling tickets. It got so busy to the point where it was uncomfortable walking through the fair because you're constantly bumping into people, and it wasn't big enough for the amount of people that were trying to get in, which is a good problem to have if you can adjust and expand your fair as the years go. And hopefully it gets bigger and the fair goes a little longer. I wouldn't mind maybe 4 or 5 weekends, but I don't know what the future holds for Washington Ren Fair. I would like it to go a little longer. Maybe plant some trees, even though it's not their property, but we'll see.
I did not get a turkey leg this summer. We had 2 trips to the Renaissance Festival. On each trip, well, I should say on one, we ate lunch at a sit-down place, and I did not get a turkey leg then. And the following weekend when we visited, I tried every single line, and all of them were out. And it is, even in the few years that we've been going to the Renaissance Festival, interrupted by COVID, knocked out one of those years, attendance has increased significantly. And yeah, it's crowded. I think the line for water was 20 minutes. And so there are definitely some concerns there. It's great to see more people coming, but I think what's probably going to happen is ticket prices are going to go up.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be, maybe there'll be fewer tickets, or just they'll increase the prices and see what happens. But yeah, there is a concern there. Now, the solution to that, from a goer, attendee perspective, is to do more pre-orders. So I don't know about the Washington fair, but the Michigan Renaissance Festival, you can pre-order a feast ticket, and then your food is taken care of. And it's actually, I have never done it, haven't taken that on yet, but I think the food is a little bit more Elizabethan inspired, as opposed to, yeah, you get your turkey leg, but then there's also, a walking taco.
The other thing, sorry, I was about to sneeze again, that the Michigan Ren Fest does that I absolutely loved is you and I did the Birds of Prey walk.
Oh yeah.
Ahead of time. So before the festival opens, you buy a ticket that gets you into the festival, but you also get to walk the grounds before everybody else with a falconry guide.
Yeah.
And you walk around, they put the glove on you, and the falcon will fly from a tree or one of the structures onto your arm, and then it'll fly away. But then you all walk and you learn about the birds, which is pretty great. But then at the end of the walk, you also get to see, we saw an owl, a kookaburra,
and a peregrine falcon. And earlier I think it was a hawk, some type of like hawk from the Southwest.
Yeah.
That was what everybody was briefly interacting with. I wouldn't say that was like an entertainment highlight that I would do every year, just because there's an extra cost associated with it. But it was one of the cooler things that I've done at the fair. Yeah.
And it's not cheap either, but just the access, especially when it gets so busy too, having the opportunity to get there early, park, and then get into the festival before everybody else. You're not waiting in the line. You're not trying to park when everybody else is getting there at the same time, and you're waiting in like a 45-minute line in your car just to get into the parking area. Overall, great experience. I really enjoyed it. Do you know if there's anything else Michigan Festival does that's similar to that?
Well, they have a whole other bird related show with other varieties of birds. I think buzzards and maybe a trained crow or raven. But what's cool about that is the people who led that hawk walk are year-round falconers. That's what they take care of. They're taking care of birds. One of the woman who was co-leading the tour, I think the next week she was going out to secure a red-tailed hawk, because there's a 3 or 4 day window in Michigan where you're allowed to go out and capture a hawk. And that type of thing is what I really like about the idea of Renaissance fairs and Renaissance festivals, is that there's this core group of people who are maintaining these traditions and these skills that and then sharing it with everybody. But I don't want to say that's what they do, because I don't know if they do that professionally, but it's a huge part of their life.
Yeah. And it's educational for the goer as well.
Yes. You would, when else would it be so easy to interact with these really incredible birds of prey? Like, I don't know if you ever read the book, My Side of the Mountain, but that's what I was thinking about when I was holding the peregrine falcon. I was like, I've been reading about and seeing these birds for all of my life, and like, I'm not going to become a falconer. But now I get to, hold one and see what it can do. And that was really cool. And same is true for the jousters. Those guys, they train year round. They take care of their horses year round. They're riding their horses year round. They have to know a little bit of blacksmithing to work on their armor and fix their armor. And they are maintaining these traditions that really have, at this point, they're completely irrelevant, anachronistic, if you will. But it's just really cool to see, roughly speaking, what it would have taken. I don't think there's any festivals that I'm familiar with in the US where there's like full contact fighting, which maybe RCA does that or SCA does that in the Pensick Festival in Pennsylvania, but I don't think it's full contact. I think there's a lot of like blunted or like foam and styrofoam things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we should see if there's any sort of Renaissance type festivals in France when we go. That would be quite cool.
That would be very cool, especially if we'll be in Normandy and we can see some like 100 Years of War. Yeah, that'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
So with that, I think maybe we switch gears and air the interview that we had.
Yeah. Do you want to set up Scuppermonkeys?
Yeah, so the Scuppermonkeys are a local Pacific Northwest pirate/Irish music themed band. They do Washington Ren Fair. They perform around the Tacoma area as well. I think the night before we interviewed them, they had a show in Gig Harbor. So if you live in the area, please follow Scuppermonkeys on their Facebook page. Look out for any new shows they have upcoming. We were informed, and they'll talk about this in the interview as well. St. Patrick's Day is a huge day for them as well. So look out, see where they're performing, and go have a Guinness and listen to Scuppermonkeys. Like I said, they're one of my top performers at the Washington Renaissance Fair. So I was very happy that they agreed to come on. It was cool to talk with them. I mean, there's more. We found out Candace does some of the fighting as well. So yeah, hopefully you as the listener will learn some stuff about what it's like to be a Ren Fair performer. That was the whole shtick of trying to get them to come on and talk about it. So especially you and I could learn about what it's like to be a Ren Fair performer.
Their music is the intro and outro music for this episode. So if you like what you hear, track them down. We didn't mention if their music is for sale, but I know that it's available on a variety of platforms.
Yes, you can listen to them on Spotify. That's where I've been listening to them. The song that we were so graciously given access to is titled Whiskey, You're the Devil and Hills of Connemara.
And those are some, I think, kind of pretty traditional Irish songs. But the way that they're excellent performers, and they, add their own flair to it, and then go out. If you like what you hear, go out and find the rest of their music. Sean described them as Irish/pirate, and they have some pirate themed, pirate inspired songs, which are kind of their original compositions, and they're a lot of fun, really great listening. And if you get a chance, you should check them out.
And here's the interview. And welcome, everybody. This is the interview that we have already edited into our regular show that we have not yet recorded. So we are joined by the Scuppermonkeys, who are a band in the Pacific Northwest. If you would like to introduce yourselves quick for our listeners, that'd be great.
We should introduce ourselves.
Definitely. I am Ben. I play guitar and do a lot of the vocals, but everybody in the band does vocals. But guitar is my specialty, I guess.
I'm Candace. I also do vocals, and I play a lot of random percussion instruments that are not real percussion instruments. We like to call them click clacks and shick shacks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect.
You also tell jokes.
Oh, I do tell jokes.
Yes.
Really bad ones.
Horrible.
Yes.
Horrible.
And I'm Tori. I am also a vocalist and play the bowron, which is an Irish type of drum.
And do I recall kazoos making?
You call it the kazoo show. Excellent.
I was at the kazoo show.
Yeah, there are occasionally times when there are
What a
kazoos.
treat for you. Yes.
Yep.
Well, thank you all for coming on. We really appreciate it. We enjoy Ren Fairs, and I really enjoyed your music at the Washington Renaissance Fair.
Thank you.
Next year, will you guys be in attendance again?
We will.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Probably in the Hammered Troll all day again. That's kind of where we hang out.
No.
Yeah, so
We're
anybody
not doing
listening, if anybody's listening and wants to see Scuppermonkeys live outside of random shows throughout the Pacific Northwest, you can also see them at the Washington Renaissance Fair, which is a fun time. So you should go out and celebrate.
Amongst many other fabulous performers.
Yeah. It's a pretty cool place.
Yeah, I will say, my wife and I, we went 2 weekends. The first weekend was a lot of shopping and then just eating. And the second weekend, we just sat in the bars and listened to music. So it's really a great time to be able to just spend an entire day listening to music. And yeah, basically if you look at it as your ticket to the fair is your cover fee to listen to all these bands, it makes it really, really worth it. So it's good.
Totally. Yeah, that's a great method.
I think that's probably the reason we decided to form a band, was because that way we could just get in for free.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
We just get to drink and play music all day.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Well, that does lead us into our first question that we have is, how did you all decide to form the band, the Scuppermonkeys?
Oh, Ben, I think you should take that one.
All right. Well, I was in a band in Alaska in a little Renaissance festival up there called the Three Barons Fair, and then I was in a band that formed there just didn't want the fun to end, kind of a thing. So we just kept the little band that we had formed to perform at the Ren Fair. Just decided to keep meeting, and so I fell in love with Irish and pirate, and sort of the nerdy music, I guess, and did that for several years in Alaska. Then I moved down here about 6 years ago, and decided to check out some Renaissance festivals here, and that's how I met Tori. And Tori and she had very much similar interests in music, and also was very talented. First time I heard her sing, I was like, I might have to talk to her about that. So we ended up getting the idea that, let's form a band, because that's something that Tori had always wanted to do anyway, and just hadn't met the right people yet. So
Candace and I had been performing together at Ret Fairs for a few years before that.
Yeah, probably 3 years or so before Ben showed up and ruined everything.
Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly right. It's all his fault.
Yep.
And I guess originally, how does one decide? So was playing at a Ren Fair, was that the goal? That you went to Ren Fairs as just a fair goer and you thought it was fun? How does one decide that I'm going to start performing at Ren Fairs?
Well, I think we all ended up performing at fairs in a different capacity. So I originally started performing in fairs as a sword fighter back in 2009. That was before the 20s. 2009 or so. Started doing sword fighting and directing sword fights. And so I became a performer on the East Coast, which is why I'm connected to a lot of East Coast performers. And so when I came out here, it was kind of a no-brainer to keep going and doing stage combat. And I also do improv. So I joined up with an improv troupe that was out here and a sword fighting troupe that was out here. And then life just kind of, progresses, and interests change, the demand changes and stuff. And somehow through it all, it ended up turning to music. So, yeah.
Yeah, same kind of thing for me. I started performing at Ren Fairs around the same time, actually, 2009, but at the Washington Fair, back when it was at Maris Farms, I think, up the road from where it is now. And it got started with a different group, and then it just kind of progressed into wanting to do music and doing more music, and then wanting to do my own music thing, and then having Ben and Candace around, and the three of us kind of being able to form that really tight core of a group, and then being like, hey, that's something, we should do that.
Can I jump in with a question real quick, Sean? And this is,
yeah,
I don't want to get too far away from the music that you guys do and talking about that, but as folks who've been performing at Ren Fairs for over a decade, what have you noticed as far as changes in how Ren Fairs, in their popularity, in the attendance, in the activities that people like to do, and the kind of the changes in the entertainment that's been offered?
I would say that the biggest change I've seen, because I've been doing Ren Fairs for 20 years now, it's really kind of neat to see how much the patrons are more willing nowadays to get involved. There's so many cosplayers out there and stuff, and a lot of them will show up and it will have nothing to do with even the fantasy genre that we're or any kind of history based cosplay, but people will show up, and it's a place that I think that they feel really, really comfortable being able to come check. It's another spot for them to be outside and whether it's fantasy or whether it's historical, whatever it is, type of cosplay, and it can be science fiction. We've had stormtroopers, whole troops of stormtroopers come through.
There's a whole Stargate group that comes once a year. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that's one of the things that I have personally witnessed is just how much the audience, the the fairgoers, how comfortable they are, doing that kind of thing, which is really neat because, man, you get to see some really cool costumes that are homemade costumes it's unbelievable, the skill of just, people you would never know that if you didn't have that setting. So for me, that's what I've seen.
I think it's neat. Over the last 20 years or so, Ren fairs have become kind of like the gathering place for the outsiders, the people who are creative. And it used to be, way back when I started doing it, it was very historical. It was like, oh, if you go to a Ren fair, you're super into Elizabethan stuff and you're just nerdy in that way. But then it kind of slowly progressed into like, well, these people are wearing funny costumes. I can wear my own funny costume. And then we used to get an Abraham Lincoln cosplayer at the Tennessee Fair all the time. It was great. But it's just, it's one of the most inclusive environments.
Yeah, definitely.
That I've ever been a part of. And it's been neat to see that growth. And there's nobody bats an eye at anything at a Ren fair nowadays. And it's kind of neat to see that.
Yep.
Yeah, the last couple of years, especially at our fair, have kind of blown up in popularity. Like there have been days where it's like, oh, okay, we're the popular kids today.
Like, oh, there's a lot of people here. All right.
Yeah, there was a day I came on a Friday and then showed up on Saturday, and they stopped selling tickets.
Yep.
And my one qualm with Washington Renaissance Fair is if it has the patronage to be much larger in terms of the space that it occupies, and there's no trees. There's just no shade. So some of those days where it's like 90 and sunny and the only place to find shade is, well, to your benefit, listening to music, because you go get that like little coverage. But it gets hot and really dry and just sunny. One of my next
it's not just the patrons that feel it. We feel it too, for sure.
Oh yeah.
One of my next questions, Scuppermonkeys, how the band name, how does that come about?
That's our number one question.
You ask that a lot.
Tori came up with that name. Tori and I were driving to a Renaissance festival in California, and we had just formed up our little band, and we knew what we were building. We just didn't know what we were going to call what we were building. And so because we were with kind of, a pirate troupe at the time too, we were performing with them as well. We thought, well, what about, like maybe the Powder Monkeys or something like that. And of course that name's been taken forever, and so, and Tori immediately shot out Scuppermonkeys, and we kind of laughed it off, and it was like, it's kind of goofy. It's a combination of two words, which are not really related very well. And it just sort of stuck. We just kept coming back to it. And then we realized, I think by the end of that weekend performing, it was like, we're just going to end up being the Scuppermonkeys. And it's a fun name. I think it kind of, people hear it once and they, for the most part, remember it. So you can blame Tori for that one. Thanks, Tori.
Yeah, that was definitely a thing that random thing that came out of my mouth once. And then it was, like you said, it was that kind of like, that'd be funny. Yeah, whatever. And then we kind of moved on. But then we kind of kept coming back to it. We got to the fair, and
the joke kept coming back to Scuppermonkeys, and it was like, oh, it would be so funny if we ended up as the Scuppermonkeys.
Yeah, we got to the end of that drive, and we got to the rest of the group, and we're like, hey guys, we came up with the name the Scuppermonkeys. That'd be so funny, right? Whatever. Move on, and then again, it would be like an hour later. But what if? And then by the end of that weekend, it was just like, all right, I think that's what we are. Like that's it. That's the name. Yeah, we tossed around things like the Stowaways, and there was a couple of ideas throwing around, but that was the first one that was like, that's the
basically
one.
All the good names were taken, so we had to make up one.
To make up a word.
Pretty much how it went down.
Next up, in terms of fair, do you guys have time throughout the year by going to other fairs to do the traditional, like be a fair goer, or like Washington Ren Fair? I have a loose idea of what the schedule's like. When you look at how many times you guys as a band play, you seem to need to stay in that area of wherever you're playing for the entirety of the day. So do you guys have opportunities throughout the year to go be Ren Fair goers? What does an average day for you look like when you are performing at Washington Ren Fair?
I mean, speaking for myself, I don't really get the chance very often to go to other fairs. other than the ones that we perform at. I did do this year one weekend of the Northern California Renaissance Fair, which we've actually performed at prior to COVID. I happened to be down there visiting family, and so went for a day. And I didn't go in costume, and I didn't have any agenda. And I'll tell you what, it is weird. When you've performed at fairs for as long as we have, going to a fair just as a patron, especially out of costume, it's a very weird feeling. Like I feel like out of place, and like I don't know, what I'm supposed to be doing, because I feel like I should be doing something, but I have nothing to do other than to just enjoy it. So
I don't think I've ever really done a fair without being in it. I mean, I guess years ago I did, years and years ago, but for the most part, because we're, as you said, we're performing all year round anyway. And then the bit of time off we have, if we were going to go to a fair that we weren't in, it's quite a bit of travel, because we're mostly involved in most of the ones that are up here. So I don't know, it would be really strange. I think I would feel like I was missing my adult or something if I wasn't there and in costume or whatever, because I know what to do when I'm in costume. I think I would be really confused to be at a Ren Fair and not, be performing, or at least be in costume for sure. So.
Mm-hmm.
It's especially awkward when you show up in costume to a fair that you know a bunch of people at, like I was at NorCal, because I got there and every time I saw somebody, they're like, "Who are you? What are you wearing?" I'm like, "I don't even know."
I'm so sorry. Oh man. In regards to what our typical day looks like, we love to pretend that we sit around the bar all day drinking and singing, but we tend to end up incredibly busy at fairs because we do our music shows, but I also direct a sword fighting show that 4 out of 5 of the Scuppermonkeys fight in. We're all trained sword fighters. So usually our day looks something like, getting up and getting costumes on and stuff like that. There's always eating breakfast. Yes, if we squeeze that in there. And then their first show of the day is a dance show. Because for some reason I ended up being one of the only people in the kind of Washington circle that knew Elizabethan dancing, which I'm working on changing. And there's people who are better at it than me that I'm trying to pass it off to. But so we had one show. First show of the day was a big dance show, and then we would immediately go to the bar and do like 2 shows, and then we'd go do a sword fighting show, and then we'd go back to the bar and do a show, and then there's always this one show. I don't know if you had the privilege of catching it. It's called the Revels show, and it's kind of like all of the various acts at fair go and do like one song for this Revels show, and it's usually in the middle of the day. So we had to do one song in that show that sat between 2 of our sets, and it was on the other side of fair. So this year particularly was a lot of running back and forth
in the hot sun.
Until
about 3:00, when we finally were like, we're done running, and then we sat in the bar for the rest of the day.
And I know I haven't done this personally, but the after hours portion of Washington Ren Fair. But can you give me a little insight into the after hours portion of the Ren Fair?
It's crazy.
Yeah, it can be a lot. Friday nights are usually a little lower key. They're like the karaoke night, basically. So they're usually like a costume party or a theme of some kind plus karaoke. And then Saturday nights are usually the big shows, whether it's the fire troupe or I think they did wrestling one night this year or something like that. I mean, I think I can speak for all of us. We don't tend to spend much time in the like inside fair after hours, just because it's so packed and so crowded, and we've been in the packed and crowded all day performing. So usually one of the first things we want to do is get back to camp.
It's really just a matter of we're just tired.
We're just tired
At the end of the day, but we try to catch a little bit of stuff.
Yeah, understandable.
It's easy to get burnt out, if you force yourself to keep going. So we tend to just kind of go back to camp and at least start to chill out a little at the end of the day. And
when you say camp, like just near the location of the fair, I've never been to the Washington Fair, but like campgrounds nearby where other
so that's something different over on this side than the East Coast. East Coast, stay on site. There are some East Coast fairs I know that have like housing for some of their performers, but in general, everyone stays off site. You're either, if you're someone flying in, you usually either get an Airbnb, or if you are staying at a campground, it's like an actual campground. But at Washington Fair, they take one field right next to the field where fair is set up, and it's this, you just camp in an open field. And they have one for participants. So you've just got this sea of people camping who are all participating, and it's like a slumber party with all of your best friends. And then they've got another field that's reserved for patron camping. So a patron to the Washington Fair can actually buy an entire weekend pass, and they can camp there. They can bring their trailer or their tents or whatever they like to camp in, and they can stay there all weekend, and they get tickets to the fair. So you can make it like a getaway. It's pretty awesome. But
plus after hours admission.
Plus the after hours, yeah.
That's something I wish that the Michigan Renaissance Festival would do, because it's a drive to get there. And every year that we've gone, my wife and I, and Sean, you've come along too on a couple of those trips. We've got dogs at home that we have to worry about. So it's like, you want to spend as much time there as you can. Plus you want to enjoy the meads and the ales and everything else. But at the end of the day, you have to drive home. It would be so much more convenient to camp. And then that would just add this whole other layer of community to it, where you don't get that when you're kind of just, commuting in for your Ren Fair.
Right.
Yeah, that is definitely something I love about this fair. I've the same thing in Tennessee. I had to drive like an hour to get home every night after performing all day. And it's so nice to just walk to your little encampment that you've set up. And we always do a nice closed off encampment where we're kind of have our fire pit in the middle, and it's our little like home base. Super nice to just walk, 5 minutes and then you're there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I know my wife and I considered camping next year, just with the line of traffic waiting to get into park.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to leave well before the gates open just to be able to beat traffic to get there and enjoy yourself. One of our last questions, we'll do this one, that we have one more. Do you have any pet peeves or things about fair that bother you?
I would say it's like any live performance. You occasionally get a patron that maybe doesn't quite understand that it is all for fun, and it's all or that you're performing as a character. And it used to be, especially before Candace and I were married and before we got together, I was, my character was a lot more flirtatious and but it was part of the goofiness of the character, and I was like expecting to get rejection and stuff like that, and acting like, kind of a schmo. But there was definitely some times where it's like, okay, you realize this is an act, right? I'm an actor. This isn't who I am, and this isn't, but I think you're gonna get that no matter where you go. There's some, it's and you try to be nice. We've got really good security people in case, anything, and I've never had to personally, utilize that in any way, but that would be the only thing. But that's anywhere you go. I mean, you gotta be careful, just because some people just don't understand that it's a show. Sometimes, they get caught up into it too much, but, other than that, it would be nice if we could just helicopter in some shade trees, as you suggested. But for the most part, it's a super, super positive experience. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah. I think probably the only thing that drives me crazy is it's the same with any live theater. There are always some people who just don't realize that we can hear you talking in the audience. Wow. Especially hecklers and stuff. And it's like, there's no screen here. I can see you.
Yeah, definitely. That can be a bit much, not just heckling, but talking in general. Like we've definitely had times where, somebody wants to sit in the front row and talk to their friends that are behind them in the second row. So they'll sit down in the front row and then turn their back to us and be like having a conversation in like the first two rows of the audience. And we're just like, there's like tables over there. Like, we know we're loud and we're probably really disrupting your conversation. I'm so sorry. But like, there's perfectly good shade tables over there. Go, if you want to talk. But if you're here, be here.
That's the same if you go to a movie theater too, though. It's irritating talking along the movie. So it's just people. You're going to run into those people occasionally.
That's definitely not a Ren Fair thing. That's like we deal with
an everywhere thing.
Yep.
And then last question I have for you all, but do you have any wholesome, shocking, funny, notable stories throughout all of your years of Ren Fair performing? We didn't want to make it just like a shocking story, but a wholesome, anything that comes to mind that really endears Ren Fair to you.
I have one.
Go for it.
I proposed to my wife, Candace, at the front gate of Washington Ren Fair a few years back.
He did. He hijacked the front gate morning show.
Yeah, I did. That will always be, pretty special. And it was really cool because the thing was, it was kind of funny because some of the crowd, I think, thought it was part of the performance of the of the opening gate. But then, of course, most of the people that were actors in it caught on pretty quickly, like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Is he proposing? And then, of course, I did right in front of everybody. So that's always going to be a really super special moment for me, and hopefully for Candace as well.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I was there. It was pretty special for me too.
Yeah.
Does the Washington Ren Fair have any? And this is something that the Michigan Ren Fair does. They have a vow renewal day and they do a big setup there. Is Washington Fair have anything like that?
That's also a very East Coast thing that I have not yet seen out here.
So we don't have like a specific day, but they do have not just vow renewals. They've done full weddings.
They do weddings, yeah, for sure.
It's just you have to have it planned ahead of time. It's not.
Yeah, we don't do the nice big. Tennessee does it also, and I think a couple other ones that I've been to on the East Coast do, where they have like a romance weekend theme, and one of the days they do a giant vow renewal.
Yeah.
Like either in the joust list or
cool.
Yeah, it's really cute.
I wouldn't be surprised if they implemented that if we end up adding more weekends in, but a lot of those fairs run a lot longer than our Washington Fair does. I mean, we only have 3 weekends, which is just 6 days. So hopefully maybe in the future sometime, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know if I have like a specific story, but one thing that occurs really frequently for me is watching kind of those magical, almost like Disneyland moments with little kids, interacting with them at fair. So in the morning, usually before we go and start our shows, we'll stand out, as the patrons are all coming in, just greeting people, good morrow, all that stuff like that. And anytime there's a little kid that's in any type of costume, like fairy wings or a dress or, a knight, we always make this huge deal about it. Like, oh, it's Princess from, the land far away. And oh, this knight, he's going to come and save me from this scary monster next to me. And just seeing those kids like light up and like, yes, I am a princess today. Yay. That's like a core memory, that they're going to remember. And that's just, I always love that.
Same kind of thing. I don't think that I really have specific things, but one of the things that I love is or just the shenanigans that the cast members get up to with each other in their spare time are always some of my favorite memories in general. Whether it's one year a group of us dressed up, there was a character that always like wore the same costume, and so it was a very like recognizable, notable character, and we all got costumes together that looked like that character. There was like 8 of us that all got dressed up in the same costume. Last year, one of our friends who plays a fairy at the Washington Fair got dressed up on top of her fairy costume in one of the noble ladies' dresses, and was just like toddling about fair. So that kind of thing I love. The things that aren't scripted, just like the random little like vignettes and shenanigans and weirdness that happens off the cuff is just some of my favorite stuff.
All right. Well, that is it. Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you guys hopefully before next Ren Fair. I was talking with Tori before we started recording. You guys were just in Gig Harbor last night. Do you have any other upcoming shows in the next month or two?
We're going to be in Leavenworth on January 6th. They call it First Friday. And it's like a big art kind of thing, music and art in Leavenworth on the first Friday of the month, first Friday of the year, I think is what it is. But yeah, we're going to play at a winery out there that invites us out there quite often. It's pretty nice. But so far that's it. We're kind of gearing up for the St. Patrick's Day run. So most pubs right now are starting to look at that schedule. So we're probably going to be booking up pretty fast, but we will keep everyone updated
All right. Well, right on. Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having
that's
us.
it.
This was fun.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks, this is awesome.
all right. Looking forward to seeing you at the Ren Fairs this summer. So Sean, bring Sam with you.
Yeah, I'll make a trip
Yeah,
out.
we'll make him fly out.
Awesome.
Nice.
It's a good
Thank
one.
you guys.
All
All
right.
right. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to that interview. We were very happy to have them on, our second official guest on our podcast. This one's kind of more of a featuring since it was just an interview that we're throwing in. But it was great insight. I really enjoyed it. We look forward to hopefully more opportunities in the future, having more people in the Ren field come on and talk to us. I know I'd be interested in having more subtopics. There's so many other things we could talk about with Ren Fairs. We could do a whole episode just talking about our costumes and your Van Gogh hat that you have.
I wasn't going to mention it, but yeah.
If you don't know Sam, he has a red beard, and when he purchased a hat from Sweden.
Yeah. So this was
No.
my.
I'm gonna
Okay,
say
all
it
right,
quick.
all right.
He purchases a hat from Sweden, and he's super excited to wear it to Ren. And he gets his costume on, and when you take his button-up shirt and his beard and his new like Swedish straw hat that he's wearing, he looked 100% like he was cosplaying as Vincent van Gogh. Now I'll let you defend yourself now.
All I wanted. So earlier we talked about, you coming up with your character, Sean is a bard, needs an instrument. Well, in my mind, I was saying, you know what? Everybody goes as Geralt of Rivia or some fantasy character. We've seen somebody as Geralt at
Geralt.
Okay. I should know that.
Geralt.
Whatever. Everybody dresses up as these fantasy characters or the queen of this and the king of that and pirates and whatnot. I was like, I'm just going to go as a peasant. So I was researching authentic peasant hats because also it does get sunny. And I found an Etsy shop of this woman in Sweden who makes straw hats like you would see in tapestries or illuminated depictions. And so, oh, that's great. And I ordered it and I got it special rush delivery and time to make it for Ren Fair. And I put it on and yes, I look exactly like Vincent van Gogh, which is fine, I guess.
A couple hundred years off of the Renaissance mark, but that's okay.
True. But we'll allow it. I think the funny thing is I have in the past gone as Vincent van Gogh for Halloween and it was pretty convincing. So I don't know if I'm going to lean into it or if I need to do something else to mix up the costume. But yes, I have a really authentic handmade straw hat and I look like Vincent van Gogh.
And that is a humorous anecdote to leave this on. Again, thank you for listening. If you know anybody who likes Ren Fairs, please send this episode their way, and then they can catch on to anything else that we've covered, which includes Rings of Power and the first season of Legend of Vox Machina.
And we'll say this, if you happen to listen to this and you are affiliated with either the Michigan Renaissance Festival or the Washington Midsummer Ren Fair, reach out. We would love to have you, love to talk about what it takes to put on a Renaissance festival, the history of the various fairs or fests, and your own experiences. So reach out. You can find us on Facebook or email us at elvesringsnerdythings@gmail.com.
Yeah, if anything, recording this episode and the work we did to create it just made me want to be even more engaged with Ren Fairs. So yeah, I might be volunteering at my local Ren Fair next year.
There we go. You can come and see Sean in the flesh.
Yeah. I don't know
Not
if I like
naked.
that. Well, I don't know if I like that phrasing, in the flesh, but I yeah, sure, in person. Okay, well, thank
on that
you.
note,
Yeah, thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you.
bye.
Whiskey, you're the devil, you're leading me astray. All the hills and mountains into a manic cave. Get sweeter, stronger, dancing or you're spunky, Arlante. Oh, whiskey, you're a darling, drunk or sober.
Now bands are off, marching off to Portugal and Spain. Drop the reader that is flying, YOLO, all will come tonight.
Love very well. Whipping to the end, doodle-la-ma-da. Beat to the end, doodle-la-ma-da. Me wet for laddie ho, there's whiskey in the jar. Hey, whiskey, you're the devil, you're leading me astray. Over hills and mountains into a manic cave. You're sweeter, stronger, dancing, you're spunky, Arlante. Oh, whiskey, powder, his firelock on his shoulder. Love very well. Wicked to the real little lamada. Me to the real little lamada. Me black boat to a laddie ho. There's whiskey in the jar. Hey, whiskey, you're the devil. You're leading me astray. All the hills and mountains into America. They're sweeter, stronger days, and you're spunkier than day. Oh, whiskey, you're my darling, drunk or sober.
Says the mother, do not wrong me, don't take me, daughter, from me. For right now I will torment you, and after death me ghost will hunt you.
Oh, very well. Wicked to the real little lamada. Me to the real little lamada. Me white folk to a laddie ho. There's whiskey in the jar. Hey, whiskey, you're the devil. You're leading me astray. All the hills and mountains into America. You're sweeter, stronger days, and you're spunkier than day. Oh, whiskey, you're my darling, drunk or sober. Gather up your pots and your old tin cans, the mash, the corn, the murray, and the bran. Run like a devil from the excise man, keep the smoke from rising, Barney. And now keep your eyes well peeled today, the excise men are on their way, searching for the mountain tay in the hills of Connemara. Gather up your pots and your old tin cans, the mash, the corn, the murray, and the bran. Run like the devil from the excise man, keep the smoke from rising, Barney.
A gallon for the butcher and a quart for John, and a bottle for the poor old Father Tom, to help the poor dear men along in the hills of Connemara.
Gather up your pots and your old tin cans, the mash, the corn, the barley, and the bran. Run like the devil from the excise man, keep the smoke from rising, Barney.
Swing to the left and swing to the right. The excise man will dance all night, drinking up the tay in the broad daylight in the hills of Connemara.
Gather up your pots and your old tin cans, the mash, the corn, the barley, and the bran. Run like the devil from the excise man, keep the smoke from rising, Barney.
Now stand your ground, for it's too late, the excise men are at the gate.
Jesus Christ, they're drinking it straight in the hills of Connemara. Gather up your pots and your old tin cans, the mash, the corn, the barley, and the bran. Run like the devil from the excise man, keep the smoke from rising, Barney. Whiskey, you're the devil, you're leading me astray. All the hills and mountains into America. You're sweeter, stronger days, so you're spunkier than day. Oh, whiskey, you're my darling, drunk or sober. How was your old one? Game ball.